we were talking about Chris Paul versus Russell Westbrook. Obviously, I had last week at the end of the week, I had Chris Paul just slightly ahead of Russell Westbrook as far as my top 10 players in the league. And I would still go to say that I trust Chris Paul in big spots, even though I understand that he's had some flameouts and his teams have had some flameouts in the playoffs. I think I would still trust Chris Paul in a big spot with the ball in his hands to either make the big shot or make the right decision more than I would Russell Westbrook. Now, listen, it's been an unbelievable 2 months from Westbrook. Maybe he has changed. Maybe he has figured it out. Maybe the light has turned around at age 31, 10, 11 years into his career, and he is a different player now. I don't know if I'm ready to fully buy into that, and I would still say game on the line, tie game, down 1, 30 seconds left, or whatever, 15 seconds left. You want to say shot clock's turned off. Who do you want the ball in their hands more, Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul? I'm still taking Chris Paul in that scenario. Would you agree with that, Scal? Or do you think Westbrook is fully a new man now, and you trust him, and all those issues in the past are out of the way?
I'm going to say it's Chris Paul, but don't think just because I say that means that I'm picking one player over another. You're saying in a tight game, yeah, I think Chris Paul, because he can pass and he sees the floor at an all-time level. But let's say there's 2 minutes to go and a team drives and misses a shot at the rim, and and Westbrook gets the defensive board. In that scenario right there, Westbrook's a more dangerous player than Chris Paul. The ball is turned over with 3 minutes to go in a game, and Westbrook gets the ball. In that scenario right there, Westbrook's a more dangerous player than Chris Paul. So, yeah, you gave me one scenario. 30 seconds to go, you need a bucket. Who do you want to have the ball? Yeah, for sure. But remember, they have James Harden too. Are you taking Chris Paul over James Harden? And you know what? And I might, just because of the fact that he's going to get an open shot and Harden had his fair share of flameouts. I understand all that. But right now you have to look at it this way. If the Rockets were playing OKC, who's going to have a better series? Chris Paul or Westbrook? Right now, those two are playing. Right now, who's going to be dominant?
Right now, it's Russell Westbrook. Right now.
No doubt. So therefore, in your scenario, you're right. At this position, and there's so many points. It's like different type of quarterback, whatever. But in the scenario in this right now, Russell Westbrook is probably the most dominant player outside of LeBron in the Western Conference because he dominates you physically. And we're seeing it for 2 months. Why do we think it's going to go anywhere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I there's like this block in the back of my mind that I just go, I'm kind of going to have to see it before I believe it. And listen, I don't mind being proven wrong. I'm not one of those people that's like going to sit down here and be like, nope, Russell Westbrook is never going to be a winner, and his game he's incapable of being the best player on a championship team, or whatever the deal, whatever argument you want to make. Like, I don't like that idea that you can just have a take and then be proven wrong and then just never waver, right? Never admit you're wrong. I will gladly admit that I'm wrong. Like, I have nothing against Westbrook. I love watching Russell Westbrook play. I think he's a top 5 guy in the league to watch because, in the past it was either boom or bust. He would be amazing or he would have a massive flame out. Either way, it was amazing. I want this guy to succeed. I want people like Westbrook who have this elite mindset to succeed. I just don't know if I'm gonna take the bait until I see it, Scal. And if that's me being proven wrong, I don't have a problem with being proven wrong. I don't have an issue with that. I'm okay with being wrong. I know you guys like you are buying into stock, and that's fine. And I hope you guys make a shit ton of money on it because that'd be hilarious and it'd be great. But there's always this thing in the back of my mind where I go, I can't forget some of the things from the past of him, not shooting the ball well or not making the right decision. That's how we got into this Chris Paul thing in the first place. I want to ask you this too, though, because we were having this conversation off air as well, and I'll bring it on the air. Do you think Chris Paul is also another guy who has been knocked for his playoff, failures, right? He famously never made the conference finals until he did it with the Rockets, obviously with James Harden. And then even then he gets hurt and they lose in kind of, infamous fashion in a way. But I would argue that, he is one of the better like the reason that his teams have lost in the playoffs aren't necessarily Chris Paul's fault, right? Those teams have lost in spite of Chris Paul's greatness a lot of the time. Not every time, but I would say
that Rockets
most cases,
comeback, that 18-point comeback, that was Chris Paul's fault. You can never allow that to happen.
That's
his
fair.
skill
Down
set is
3-1.
much too great for that to happen. But outside of that, it's just bad matchups and stuff like that. By the way, remember on this show on Scal Pals, we root for first-round matchups. For instance, we want the Lakers to play the Pelicans in the first round. No disrespect to Memphis or anything like that. There's just a lot of side stories. We want Philly to play Miami, and we want the Houston Rockets to play the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, here's the shitty thing, too. I actually think could you make an argument? I want to save this for Swisher Stretch because I actually think the Oklahoma City might be a top 4 team. If you throw records aside, just like name 4 teams in the West that you would be afraid of. I think there's an argument to be made that Oklahoma City is in that 4. But let's do that.
Higher than, yeah, no doubt. They're better than the Utah Jazz right now. I would be more afraid of playing OKC than Jazz. Go ahead.
Put a pin in that for a second because I do have that as one of my Swisher stretches. But do you know where Chris Paul ranks in the history of playoff PER?
He's a PER guy, though. I'm not a big PER guy.
Well,
Chris Paul is Mr. PER. That's why he's going to go down in the hall. That's why all these guys think that he's so good because it's all about PER for him. Low turnover, has the ball in his hands. Like PER does not benefit guys who move it really quickly and the ball like flies around. Like for instance, his PER, isn't it better than Steph Curry's in the playoffs? And I would definitely take Steph Curry over Chris Paul.
But PER is a stat that typically benefits big men, right? Like you big men playing like weird minutes, like typically their PERs are going to be high, right? I think it was, who was the guy? Was it Dwight Powell? I think he was always like a PER monster. Like I like Dwight Powell. He's a good player. And, hopefully he comes back from that Achilles injury. But there were PER rankings where Dwight Powell would be like a top 15 PER guy, which is obviously not true. But the only guy, Rudy Gobert, another guy. Yeah, although I would argue that that's a little bit more justified than Dwight Powell. But
no doubt.
But these are the 5 guys that are ahead of Chris Paul in playoff PER. Michael Jordan's number 1. George Mikan is number 2. LeBron is 3. Shaq is 4. Hakeem is 5. And Chris Paul is 6. He's ahead of Kevin Durant, Tim Duncan, Charles Barkley, Dirk. Russell Westbrook's actually reasonably high on that list. He's number 13. Jerry West. My point being, for the most part, the issues with Chris Paul's teams in the playoffs have not been Chris Paul. If you look at the Hornets teams earlier in his career, like those teams overachieved massively. Like I think they ended up, what was the first round upset they had like early on there? I think they were a 2 seed or something, and they didn't end up making the conference finals. But that wasn't Chris Paul's fault. And I think you could argue more of the issues with the Clippers during the Lob City era was more of a Blake Griffin DeAndre thing than it was a Chris Paul problem. And I think Chris Paul got sick and tired of it kind of at the end. That's why he wanted to end up leaving that team because he kind of realized that I don't think he loved the basketball that they were playing. And I don't think he thought that they were going to go anywhere. So I just look at Chris Paul and I go, you can point to him and say, oh, okay, he's had his failures in the playoffs. But I think if you really look into it, those, I just trust him. I trust Chris Paul in a playoff series. And you're right. If I had to pick one guy right now, Russell Westbrook for a full game, or Chris Paul, it's probably going to be Russell Westbrook, but I still trust Chris Paul's decision-making late more than I do Russell Westbrook.
Let me just put that in context for our listeners or viewers. Okay, first 46 minutes, who you trust in more, Chris Paul or Giannis?
Oh, Giannis, yeah.
Okay, last 2 minutes, Chris Paul or Giannis?
It's Chris Paul, Chris Paul.
There's no disrespect. It's no disrespect to Westbrook because, there's only a few guys that you would take in the last 2 minutes of a game in a playoff game over Chris. I mean, like there's LeBron. I take LeBron over him. I would probably right now without seeing it, I'd probably take Chris Paul over Luka. I think after this playoffs, I'd be like, Luka, he's good, man. I think he's gonna be fine down the stretch. But right now, it's like what you're gonna get with him. There's a lot of variables out there, So yeah, Chris Paul is definitely that's what makes OKC dangerous. By the way, I don't think he'll get nicked up this year because they have so many offensive weapons. Yep. You're going to need him in clutch moments. So he does a great job of picking his spots and when to go. So it'll be a very, very different playoff. But once again, Scal Pals is rooting. We want Rockets, OKC, first round.